Hi, my name is Anusha, and I'm a software engineer working on the Anbox Cloud dashboard. Today, I will be walking you through the process of creating an instance from an application and from an image. Before we jump into the demo, let's quickly go over instances in Anbox Cloud. So you have two types of instances, base and regular instances. Both base and regular instances can be created either as containers or virtual machines. The difference between the two is that base instances are created automatically from applications. These are temporary instances which are used to bootstrap the application. And as soon as the process of bootstrapping the application is completed, the base instance is automatically deleted as well. Regular instances, on the other hand, can be created from either applications or images, and you can choose when you want to delete them. So let's begin with the demo. Now for the demo, I'm going to head over to the applications page and create a new application. And I'm going to use the OneList APK, which I have just uploaded. If you don't know already, OneList is an application which manages several lists where you can create lists or add, edit, and delete items in that list. So let's begin by giving our application a name. I'm going to call it OneList, and I'm going to create the application in a container. The default image for containers in my setup is Jammy Android 13 AMD 64, which is automatically selected here. And you can see that by default, if we go over to the configuration section, Watchdog is enabled. I'm also not going to whitelist any other packages over here. So let's create the application. If you want a deeper dive into creating applications, there's another tutorial that you can check out. Okay, so now you can see that this application is in an initializing status. To create a regular instance from an application, you need to wait for the application to reach the ready status. If we quickly head over to the instances page, you will notice that there is an instance that is already created, which is a base instance created as a container with streaming disabled from the OneList application. As I mentioned earlier, this is the base instance created for the OneList application to bootstrap this application. Okay, let's give this a couple of minutes. Now that our application is ready, we can head back to the instances page, where you will notice that the base instance that we saw earlier has automatically been deleted. This is because the process of bootstrapping the OneList application is now completed. To create a new instance, hit the Create Instance button. You have several fields that you can configure while creating an instance. First, let's give this instance a name. Let's call it list. And next, you can click this drop down over here to create the instance either from an application or from an image. Now, in both cases, the instance will provide you with a full Android system. However, if you create an instance from an application and your application is based on an Android app, which in our case is the OneList APK, this app is launched after the system boots and is monitored by the Watchdog. With the default configurations, when you stream this instance, you will see that only the app is visible and you will not see the Android launcher. For now, I'm going to go with application. If you have several applications that you have created, you can select which application to create the instance from in this drop down here. And if your application has a new version that you want to test before publishing it to your users, you can first go and update your application to create a new version for it, and then create the instance from that specific version. But for now, we only have one version. There are some additional optional sections that you can configure, starting with the capabilities section. Now, as you can see over here, streaming, graphics, and Watchdog are enabled by default. Streaming is required to actually stream this instance. And you also have the additional developer mode. This mode will essentially turn off some features that are otherwise usually present in an instance. And this is mainly useful when you are developing add-ons inside an instance. But for this demo, we will keep it disabled. You can also test your application in different virtual display configurations, like selecting a specific screen resolution or frame rate or display density, and even testing it in different screen orientations. For now, I'm going to stick with the default values. And finally, the third optional configuration section includes all the other configuration details. You can specify which node to launch this instance on. You can specify the disk size, boot package, boot activity. You can also add some optional tags. For example, I'm going to add the tags demo and list. This is essentially a comma separated list. You can also additionally pass custom data to your instance in the user data field, and optionally pass some features to your instance, which I will get to in a while. Finally, you can either create or create and start your instance. So you can create and start this instance now, or just create it and have it prepared on disk to get started anytime at a later point. Since I want this instance running right away, I'll choose create and start. Now, as you can see here, the instance has been created and has been listed in this table. You can see that this is created as a container. This is a regular instance, and it's created from the OneList application. Now, an instance moves through several different stages and has different statuses based on its state. So the possible statuses include created, started, prepared, running, stopped, error, deleted, and unknown. To stream your instance, you need to wait for it to reach the running status. So let's give this a couple of minutes. Until then, you can also view more details about a specific instance by clicking on its name, which opens the instance's details page. Now, in the details page, you have 3 different tabs, starting with the overview tab. This displays all the information about an instance, and if the instance is application-based, it also displays details about that application. Alternatively, if your instance is image-based, you will also see the images details. The terminal tab over here, as the name suggests, provides you with the terminal, which is a bash shell on the Ubuntu instance, which is hosting Anbox Cloud. Some starter commands are provided for your reference. Note that you can only access this terminal if the instance is either in the started or in the running status. Finally, the logs tab here provides you with several logs that you can view when you create an instance, which is in an error status. You can also get links to those log files. Now let's go back. You can see that the instance is finally in the running status. You have several actions that you can perform on this instance, like streaming the instance, setting up sharing, using Connect ADB to debug it, which we have a dedicated tutorial for, stopping or starting the instance based on the status of your instance, and finally deleting this instance. Let's stream this instance. Awesome. Now we have our Android stream ready. As expected, because we created this instance from an application with an Android APK and the default settings, you do not see the Android launcher, just the OneList app. So let's interact with the stream. Let's maybe add an item. To type into the Android stream, I'm currently using my laptop's keyboard, and maybe add a test item. You can also click, you can swipe, and do any additional things. So with Watchdog enabled, it continuously monitors your instance for issues. So let's say your application crashes or it becomes unresponsive. or your application is pushed to the background by another application that isn't whitelisted in the allowed packages list, Watchdog will step in, terminate the instance, and set its status to error. And as you can see, by default, Anbox hides the Android system UI when the application runs in the foreground mode. However, if your use case requires access to the system UI or a virtual keyboard or any additional features, you can enable them using the feature flags while creating an instance. For example, let's create another instance with mostly the same configurations, but maybe let's give this another name, list with features. I'm going to create the instance from an application, one list, same version. The only thing that's going to be different is in the configuration section down here, I'm going to define certain features that I want in this instance. You can see more details about the feature flags by clicking this link here. So as you can see, this takes you to our documentation where you can see the supported features for AOSP and AAOS images. If you want to see the exact values that you're going to pass in, you can head over here, and this lists all the features that we have present. For this demo, let's pass in two features. Let's maybe pick up enable system UI as well as enable virtual keyboard. So quickly going back. And over here, I'm going to pass in both these values. So that's really the only difference while creating this second instance, but maybe let's also create this new instance in the landscape orientation. Okay, let's hit create and start. As you can see, we've got this notification that this list with features instance is being created and started. Okay, the instance is now running. The actions that are also available in the table are present over here in the details page as well. So let's stream this instance now. Okay, so now you can see that this instance is in the landscape orientation. You can now type in using a virtual keyboard instead. Some sample values. You can also interact with the system UI. Okay, and that's all for creating instances from applications. Before I get to the next part of this tutorial, I'm going to quickly delete these instances. Now you can delete instances individually, but you also have an option to perform bulk actions. So I'm going to select all the instances that I have here and select the action that I want to perform in bulk. Now, a quick tip, if you want to perform a bulk action without this confirmation message here, you can hold down the Shift key before clicking on that action, which I'm going to do now. Okay, so now the instances are being deleted. The next part of this tutorial deals with creating instances from images instead of applications. Now let's head over to the images page over here. This page lists all the available images. You have two types of images, containers and VMs, and you can define a default image for each type. Okay, now we see that the instances have been deleted. Let's head back to the instances page and now create a new instance. When you create an instance from an image, you are essentially creating raw instances. And unlike application instances, image-based instances run the full Android system without any additional apps pre-installed. So let's first give this instance a name. I'm going to give it the name Android. Now, in the create the instance from dropdown, I'm going to select image instead. Now, as you can see, we have slightly different fields here in the source section from that of when you created the instance from an application. If you choose to create the instance as container, you'll see only container images. But if you switch to VM, you'll see only VM images. But in either case, the default image that you have configured for that type will be selected automatically. So you also have an option here to define the resource types, the number of CPU cores, and the amount of memory that you want. Now, in the remaining configuration sections, it's mostly the same as that of applications, except you can no longer enable Watchdog. So let's go ahead and create and start this instance. Okay, and let's give this a couple of minutes to become running. Now that our instance is running, let's stream it. And as you can see here, unlike application instances, we get to interact with the full Android system without any additional applications. So let's quickly go ahead and interact with it a bit. Maybe open the gallery, go back to the home screen. Yeah, pretty cool. So based on your use case, you can choose to either create instances from applications or images. Lastly, a quick tip that I'd like to share before closing off is if you're on the images or applications page, you can create an instance directly from there using the create instance button for the image that you want or for the application that you want. And when you click this, it opens the create instance form with certain fields that are already pre-filled for you, which just makes the process even more quicker. And that wraps up our tutorial. I hope you found this helpful and thank you for watching.